Alexander the Great's body could be hidden under a Muslim mosque of Alexandria, Egypt, according to indications. Now we know I have a lot of people who are very interested in Alexander the Great, and this is something I just recently found. It's from a Greek article by a Greek archaeologist, Nineta Kondraru-Rasia, of an article of 2013. Now we know that Alexander the Great lived about 330 BC, and there were also prophecies concerning him in the book of Daniel, given by the archangel Gabriel to the prophet Daniel, concerning the little horn that we put an end to the big horn, meaning the Persian Empire. We know that the prophet Daniel was in exile with the Hebrews for 70 years in that area, and they were then released and came back to Jerusalem to build the second temple. And Alexander the Great was that king from northern Greece. When he conquered that part of Asia Minor, he then went to the temple. The temple, of course, was the second temple already built, because that was after the exiles came back. They built the second temple. This was around 330 BC. And the high priests of the Temple of Jerusalem told him about the prophecy given by the archangel Gabriel to prophet Daniel concerning him. And after that, he went to ancient Egypt, and he asked the high priest there, he says, "Am I the son of a god?" And they told him, "Yes, you are," because they knew that his actual biological father was the pharaoh Nectanebo of Egypt, who had fled for his life, and he went to the palace of King Philip in northern Greece, in Veria, just south of Salonika. And the queen, his mother, Olympias, became pregnant, even though King Philip was away on one of his conquests. And when Philip came back, he found his wife pregnant, and he was saying, well, how can this be? He said, "Well, I'm pregnant by a god, and my son is going to be a god." Because King Nectanebo, the pharaoh of Egypt, kept on telling her he was a magician from Egypt. He didn't tell her his true identity, and he kept telling her that she would give birth to a god, and she believed him. And the high priests in ancient Egypt actually knew, well, obviously, the pharaohs were thought of as being gods, deities. So and they knew that, of course, Alexander was the biological son of Nectanebo, the pharaoh. Of course, they confirmed to him that he was a god, the son of a god. And they also put that ram's horn headpiece on him. Now, yes, the horns also signify that you have superiority, sovereignty. Now, going to this article, she says that they learned that the tomb of Alexander the Great has been found in Amphipolis, that's in northern Greece. We told Jean-Yves Aberer, French archaeologist who had been searching the land and sea for 20 years for traces of the city founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BC. She said, "We found him in Alexandria, Egypt, where he digs on a permanent basis." That is the French archaeologist, Jean-Yves Aberer. He digs there on a permanent basis. He's retrieved architectural relics from the lighthouse of Alexandria. We know that there was a big lighthouse there. There was also a very famous library of Alexandria, Egypt. Alexandria was the city that Alexander established. That's why it has his name, Alexandria. And that the library burnt down, and the lighthouse obviously is non-existent. So he retrieved architectural relics from the lighthouse of Alexandria from the sea, and has uncovered a series of tombs in the Gabari area where the famous necropolis, or the cemetery, is mentioned, which Strabo also mentions. Also rich houses with mosaics on the floors, very beautiful homes of the rich and famous of that time. Anyway, the famous archaeologist's answer from the other end of the phone line was a shocking laugh. Quote, "Do you want to say that the body was found?" End quote. He told us later, as serious archaeologists are not looking for the tomb of Alexander the Great, but for his body, which was lost when his tomb which was worshipped by emperors, kings, and crowds of admirers for 8 whole centuries, was destroyed. All written sources place the tomb of Alexander the Great in Alexandria. There are detailed descriptions of ancient writers, real reports of the time that speak of the imposing procession that went on in 321 BC when the embalmed body of Alexander the Great came from Babylon. That's where he died in 323 BC. They put him in a carriage of gold, and it was filled with honey, and they put his body in there to preserve it in honey. It seems that, it's not in this article, but I remember reading it somewhere else. It seems that the preparation of the burial took almost 2 years, hence the embalming of the body and the construction of the mausoleum in which it was finally buried. According to the descriptions, the dead Alexander was placed in a repressed golden shrine, which was transported by a golden chariot pulled by 100 horses. Alexander himself had asked to be buried in the temple of Ammon Zeus. In the oasis of Shiva, Quintus Curtius Rufus' History of Alexander the Great writes, the transfer of the body was assigned by the assembly of Alexander's partners and bodyguards, who were Perdiccas, Leonatos, Ptolemy, Phaedon, Ariston, and Aridaeus. To Aridaeus, Diodorus the Sicilian, 80 BC to 20 BC, who lived closer to the fact, states, quote, on the conquest of the body and the construction of the armament of the future, they carried the body of the final king to Ammon, the area of Ammon in Egypt. Of the final king to Ammon, they put Ariadon, unquote. That is, the procession started from Babylon to Egypt, led by Ariadus, and the golden chariot, quote unquote, which was followed by an entire army and a large crowd, according to Diodorus, IH 26. On the Egyptian-Syrian border, Ptolemy of Lagos, Alexander's comrade in arms, he was Ptolemy who also took over Egypt, decided to change course and not bury the great general in the temple of Ammon, but in a luxurious mausoleum in central Alexandria. Quote, Ptolemy judged at that moment, Ammon is not present at the time, and according to the Polish Alexandria, which was, according to the city of Alexandria, which was built under him, they were almost all of them, according to the universe apotheosis. They built a mosque according to its size, and not a mosque, but a temenos, a construction, okay? A construction of like a house of worship, okay? So they built it according to its size and duration during the construction of Alexander the Great, worthy of burying him there. This is according to Diadrastika, IH 28, verse 3 to 5. Most ancient writers state that it was buried in a mausoleum in the place of body or a sign where the royal tombs were located, quote, and the part of the kingdoms is the so-called body, and Alexander is buried in the king's tombs, end quote, notes Strabo in Geographically Arianus after Alexander, Jacobi, FGRH 156, excerpts 9 to 25. And also Dion the Cassius agree with the position, according to Rome IST 51. It was an aristocratic district, which many are trying to locate at the junction of the Road of the House and Canopy Road in today's densely populated Egyptian capital, but they have not succeeded. Some believe that it's located in the so-called Heights of the Crops, or Com el Damas, in a place where the Nabi Daniel Muslim mosque is located, where it is rumored that the body of Alexander the Great is located. And this is the mosque right here, okay? The Nabi Daniel Mosque. This is it right here. So this is where they believe his body is buried, under this mosque. Now, the mosque is Nabi Daniel Mosque in Alexandria, most likely built on top of the tomb of Alexander the Great. Now, here we must say that the former general of Antiquities, Director Yanis Tserdakis, who led the team that went to Siva in 1995 when archaeologist El Suvaldis claimed to have found Alexander the Great's tomb, believes the mosque should be explored, as it's known that when the Muslims entered Alexandria, this great mosque, given that Alexander belongs to the prophets mentioned in the Quran, believe it or not, I didn't even know this until just now. Alexander belongs to the prophets mentioned in the Quran. He does not rule out that the mosque was built on top of his tomb. He is even surprised by the refusal of the General Secretariat of Antiquities of Egypt in the recent request of foreign scientists to check the floor of the mosque by electronic means in order to give an answer to this question. And Mr. Tserdakis adds, adding another dimension to the whole issue, quote, there must be Arabic texts of that time that provide information about the tomb. Unfortunately, however, they are not accessible to us, end quote. Now, hopefully in the near future, they will be allowed to have a TC scan of the floor. Now, the ancient traveler of Pausanias of the 2nd century AD, in his writings of Attica 6:3, he is somewhat involved in this case because he mentions that Alexander's first burial place by Ptolemy I was in Memphis and was followed by his transfer from that by Ptolemy II, the son of the first Ptolemy, to Alexandria. The information about Memphis is also written in the Paris Chronicle, quote, Alexander was placed in Memphis, end quote. We also have extensive reports on the visits of famous people to the memory of Alexander in Alexandria. Dionysius Cassius mentions in his Roman history that Alexander's tomb was visited by Julius Caesar, Septimus Severus, and Caracalla. And he notes, in fact, that when Julius Caesar entered Alexander's mausoleum, he remained silent for a moment, standing, looking at the well-preserved dead Alexander, because of course, he was embalmed. His emotion was so great that when he touched Alexander's face, he broke a piece of the dead man's nose. According to Dion Cassius, 51:16. That was, of course, Julius Caesar. And we know that the Ptolemies were later ruling Egypt, and the last pharaoh of Cleopatra was the last pharaoh of Egypt was Cleopatra. Cleopatra was also the name of Alexander the Great's sister. And now it was a very common Greek name, Cleopatra. But this Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, as we know, was a paramour of Julius Caesar. It said that she even had his child. And then Mark Antony as well. But first she was, very, very intimate with Julius Caesar, and then later on with Mark Antony. But anyway, so this Julius Caesar is the one that went to, the Caesar of Rome, went to visit the tomb of Alexander the Great in the mausoleum in Alexandria. So emotional that he touched Alexander's nose and he broke the piece off his nose. Now, also, Caesar Augustus also went and worshipped the tomb of Alexander after his victory at Actium at 31 BC, defeating Mark Antony and Cleopatra. So even Augustus Caesar went to visit the tomb, the body of the embalmed body of Alexander the Great. He went to offer the crown to the eminent dead, and when his guides invited him to visit the tomb of the Ptolemaic dynasty, Augustus replied, I have come to see a king and not dead. I have come to see a king and not dead people. He went to see. Okay, he said. In other words, Augustus Caesar's very moving, and you could understand how much respect and honor he had for Alexander the Great, that he considered him alive. He says, I have come to see a king and not dead people. Okay? So when his guides invited him to visit other tombs of the Ptolemaic dynasties, he said, no, I want to see the king. That's it. And that's the only relic and tomb he visited. Amazing. So, what do you think? Obviously, we found him. This is it. I mean, when you have Caesars going there, a line of Caesars, you've got Julius Caesar, you've got Caesar Augustus, you've got them going there, viewing him, and foregoing everybody else. Obviously, this is Alexander the Great. This is where he is. And this Nadi Daniel mausoleum right here is over his grave, over his tomb, where the Roman emperors, Julius Caesar and Caesar Augustus, went to visit him. So tell me what you think. I think this is absolutely fascinating. And there must be some reason. I mean, we know that the Egyptian antiquities guy was Zahi Hawass. He stopped a lot of people from, examining more closely with technical expertise, various things, even this. I mean, maybe now that Zahi Hawass is no longer the Minister of Antiquities, maybe they should ask again, and maybe they will be allowed to scan the floor to see if there is a man there. And he would definitely be buried by himself, not anybody else with him. Wonderful. So please leave your comments. I think this is very important. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.